I do have to tell you something else that happened. I was in a coffee shop last week in North Carolina, and I walked in, and within just a few seconds, I knew that it was my kind of place. So the barista greeted me like we used to be college roommates. I mean, it was the greatest thing ever. Made the cup for me, put a little smiley face on it, and when my coffee was ready, he didn't just say, "Hey, large pour over for John." He said, "Coffee is ready for John," almost screaming it like one would do when they found out they won the lottery. I mean, it was this great moment. The whole experience took less than 5 minutes, but I knew that when I was leaving that place, that I couldn't wait to go back. So that barista understood something profound about human nature. He understood that excellence isn't just about making good coffee. It's about making people feel valued. He understood that first impressions create lasting impact. And he understood that how you treat people in the first few moments usually determines whether or not there's going to be other moments after that. Like I said a few weeks ago, I don't want to come down on you because I love you guys, but let's be honest. None of us are, well, with few exceptions, most of us aren't very good at first impressions. But we size people up in about 7 seconds. And that's not even long enough to say the Lord's Prayer, but it's long enough for us to decide whether somebody is worth our time. And that's pretty bad. And if we think that, they have something to offer us, if they belong here. And what's terrifying about that is, what if somebody walked into our church and in those 7 seconds felt like they didn't belong? What if the person that God is pursuing, that the Holy Spirit has been working on for months, the person who finally worked up the courage to walk through those doors, what if they left because they felt that we were too distracted to notice them? And that's not just a tragedy. That's a direct contradiction of the gospel that we say we believe. So today, as we continue our teaching series, we're going to spend a few minutes talking about first impressions. Because excellence isn't something that we strive for. Excellence in making people feel welcome and making people feel noticed. It's not something that we do just to make ourselves feel good. Excellence is something we pursue because it reflects the character of God. And when we half-heartedly welcome people, when we treat guests like interruptions rather than invitations from God himself, we're not just being unkind, we're misrepresenting the heart of God the Father. So I want to dive into the text in 1 Peter chapter 4. Peter is writing to followers of Jesus who've been scattered from other followers of Jesus because of religious persecution. So these are people who know what it feels like to be outsiders. They know what it feels like to be where they're not really welcomed and certainly where they're not known. And so what he tells them at the beginning, so let me get there first. So if I'm going to read, I've got to read. So 1 Peter chapter 4, we're going to start in verse 8. He says, above all, maintain constant love for each other. Now, I'm going to pause right there because that's not the whole of verse 8, but that's a good place for us to start because he starts with above all. Not when you feel like it, not when it's convenient, or not when these people are easy to love. No, he says above all. So this is a non-negotiable priority number one. So in Peter's larger teaching context, and what he's teaching in this particular section, is he's teaching people what it means to really follow Jesus. But what he's saying in that larger context is that he's telling us that this is foundational for everything we do as the people of God. To, above all, maintain constant love for one another. But here's where it gets really interesting. So the word that Peter uses, that we translate as maintain, is the same word used for an archer who's pulling back a bow. And what he means by that is that this isn't some sort of passive love. This isn't the kind of love that, hey, if you love me, then I'll love you back kind of love. No, this is active, and it's intentional, and it's love that requires energy. So this connects directly to what Paul wrote to his friends in Philippi. He said this in Philippians chapter 2, starting in verse 3. He said, do nothing out of selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility consider others as more important than yourselves. Everyone should look not to his own interest, but rather to the interest of others. So, when we welcome people with intentional excellence, we're putting their interests above our own comfort. we're saying, hey, look, your experience here matters more than my convenience. And I've been in churches where the exact opposite is the expectation of church members. So why do we then put other people's experience and their interest above our own comfort and above our own preferences? Well, we find the answer in the rest of verse 8 back in 1 Peter chapter 4. Because actually, Peter's quoting one of the Proverbs chapter 10, verse 12. He says, above all, maintain constant love for one another, since love covers a multitude of sins. Now, don't get any ideas. This doesn't mean that we're sweeping sin under the rug or pretend that problems don't exist. It means that rather love creates an environment where people can be honest about their struggles, where grace is given freely and second chances aren't just possible, but they're expected. So think about it this way. When somebody walks into our church, they're not just looking for a place to sit. They're looking for a place to belong. They're looking for people who will love them not just after they get their act together, but love them even in the middle of their mess. They're looking for a community that reflects the heart of God, the same God who loved us while we were still sinners. And so Peter continues, and he's about to get more practical in verse 9. He says, be hospitable to one another without complaining. Now, I know this does not apply to you guys. It applies to the people who aren't here today. So look around and see who's... I'm totally kidding. Don't do that. But it does actually apply to us sometimes. I wish it didn't apply to me, but it really does. So how many of us have been guilty of complaining when Peter tells us to do the exact opposite? We think things like that in a church context. We walk in, that dude's sitting in my seat. I remember, I think I've told this story before. My parents came to visit me. I was a student pastor in Clearwater 400 years ago. And so they came into church, and they drove over, and they sat down because it was a holiday weekend, and they let the youth pastor preach. And so nobody was in church because it was Youth Pastor Sunday. And so I was getting ready to preach, and they came over, and this dear, sweet lady, it was right before church, she walked up to my parents, and she said, I've never seen you here before. You must be new. And my mother, who is all Alabama, was very kind and very gracious and very sir. Oh, yes, honey, we just came here, and our boy is going to be preaching today. And she said, I knew you were new because you're sitting in my seat. Doggone it. So anyway, don't do that. But every now and again, we walk into church, and we think, dude, that's my seat. That's my song. You stole the last bit of coffee. You took my lucky bulletin, whatever that may be. But sometimes those thoughts reveal something much bigger than just what we prefer. Sometimes it reveals that we've forgotten the gospel. We've forgotten that we were once outsiders who were welcomed in. We've forgotten that hospitality isn't about our comfort. Ultimately, it's about God's kingdom. But the interesting thing about the word hospitable here, it's a compound word in the Greek language. And I'm not going to get too academic, but the word is philoxenos. And so it comes from two words, again, compound word. So philo means love. It's one of the ancient Greek words that we translate as love, but it means affection, friendship. So like Philadelphia, it's the city of brotherly love. So phila is love. And xenos actually means strangers. And so when Peter is writing to these people to be hospitable, what he's saying is, I want you to love strangers. That's how we're supposed to act as followers of Jesus. It's the exact same word, by the way. This is used somewhere else. It's used in the book of Hebrews, chapter 13, verse 2. It says, don't neglect to show hospitality, for by doing this, some have welcomed angels as guests without knowing it. So what this means, so what does it mean? I'm glad you asked. What does it mean for us, both theologically and in ecclesiological practice, is that every person who walks through our doors is a divine appointment. Every guest is somebody that God is specifically bringing to our family of faith for a purpose that we don't even know yet. And so we can't ignore that people are walking in, whether they've been part of our church for 50 years or 5 minutes. We recognize, because of this biblical principle, that God is doing this. God is bringing somebody to us on purpose and for a purpose. It's a divine appointment. It reminds me of something that Jesus said. We looked at this a few weeks ago as we started this series. We dug in a little bit more deeply to what Jesus said in Luke chapter 14, starting in verse 12. He also said to the one who had invited him, when you give a lunch or dinner, don't invite your friends, your brothers, your sisters, your relatives, or your rich neighbors, because they might invite you back, and then you'd be repaid. On the contrary, when you host a banquet, invite those who are poor, maimed, lame, or blind, and then you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. So Jesus is teaching in that passage that hospitality isn't about reciprocity. It's about reflecting God's generous heart to people who cannot pay us back. That's not why we give. We don't give in order to get something in return. We give because we have been given to first by God, and God's heart lives in us. God's actions, God's Spirit is working in us to do the things of God so that we give like God, expecting nothing to be given to us in return. But in light of what we're learning from Peter today, we're learning that hospitality without excellence is actually just another form of selfishness. If we're careless in how we welcome people, if we treat hospitality like a burden rather than a privilege, then we're not showing love. We're not showing people that they matter to us. Let me give you a practical example of this. You know what happens when people walk into our church the first time? They're nervous. They don't know where to park. Except people who have a boat trailer, they know where to park. But nobody else, like coming to church, nobody knows where to park. You don't know where to sit. You walk in, you're like, am I dressed okay? That guy's wearing jeans and he's got a microphone. Is that the pastor? He's wearing jeans. I'm too dressed up, or I'm not dressed up enough. Am I going to know when I'm supposed to stand up or sit down? Because I remember when I was in school, we had these kneeling things, and I don't see the kneeler things, and I don't know if I'm supposed to stand. Is there going to be a trumpet? Is there going to be incense? Am I going to have to give? Are there snakes? I mean, I don't know what to expect. And so people, you think I'm kidding? People walk into the door not knowing at all what to expect. I can prove that to you this way. One time I was in Toronto, Canada, and we were going to visit a missionary there, and it was great. And they said, hey, today we're getting off the train. I had no idea where. I didn't plan this trip. I was just along for the ride, having a great time. So we get off the train, and like, hey, we're going over to the Sikh temple. I'm like, I don't know what a Sikh temple is. It sounds big. It's a temple. And so I went into this temple. I had never seen anything like this before. And they took us into the place where they had this great worship, and they worship. This is the craziest thing. They took us up to what they would consider, they would liken it to the Holy of Holies in the temple in Jerusalem. It was the most special place that their deity is worshipped. And they had a bed. So it was probably a 15 by 15 room, not very big at all. And in the middle of this room, there's a bed, this opulent bed covering, just beautiful, mahogany wood. It was gorgeous. But in the middle of this bed were about 50 knives and swords. I thought, they brought me in here to kill me. I'm going to die next to a beautiful bedspread. But that's what they believed. That's their deity needed these weapons to protect people. And I thought, it looks nice, sounds crazy. When people walk into a church for the first time, they have no idea what it's like in here. It may as well be a mahogany bed with a beautiful bedspread with 50 knives on it. People have no idea what to expect. Now, we can approach this reality a couple of different ways. We could go the first way, kind of beyond a hyper-Calvinistic perspective, and say, well, if they're really supposed to be here, they will be here, and they'll just figure it out. Or we could approach this with excellence, knowing that God in his sovereignty is entrusting people to us. That's a much greater responsibility. We could have greeters who are genuinely excited to see new faces. We could have clear signage that helps people navigate through our facility. We could have systems in place that make sure that nobody falls through the cracks. So which approach do you think best reflects the heart of God? Which approach shows that we really do value people the way that God values them? Well, Peter wasn't finished, so let's go back to 1 Peter chapter 4. We'll pick up in verse 10. He says, just as each one has received a gift, use it to serve others as good stewards of the varied grace of God. Now, Please don't miss how monumental this is for you. Every single person in this room who's a follower of Jesus has been given gifts, not just the people on the stage, not just people in leadership, but every single person. And those gifts aren't for you, they're for other people. So we're also called to be good stewards of God's grace. So what does a good steward do? A good steward manages resources with excellence. A good steward doesn't waste what's been entrusted to them. A good steward understands that they're accountable for how they handle something that belongs to somebody else. And so I'm going to take really good care of it because it's not mine. It belongs to God. God's just letting me use it. I'm not going to. You ever loan somebody a tool and you get it back and you realize there's a reason this chowderhead doesn't have tools in the first place. They can't take care of it. So God is giving it, not that y'all have done that, it's the guy who's not here. But anyway, I'm just kidding. But God has given us a gift. God has given us very many gifts. God has given this body varied gifts so that we use them well because they belong to Him. So we're going to use them according to God's understanding of what is best and right and true. So when we are careless with hospitality, when we're half-hearted in welcoming people, when we treat guests like interruptions, we're being bad stewards then of God's grace. We're wasting the opportunities that God gives to us to show people who He is, who deeply, desperately need to hear it. So Peter continues, first part of verse 11. He says, if anyone speaks, let it be as one who speaks God's words. And if anyone serves, let it be from the strength that God provides. Now let's pause there. So this is where excellence becomes non-negotiable. Whether we're greeting somebody at the door, serving coffee, just having a conversation, we are representing God. We are speaking His words and we're serving in His strength. And that means that every single interaction matters. Every conversation is an opportunity to reflect the character of God. Every act of service is a chance for you and for me to show somebody else what God's like. So think about this. If somebody judged God's character based on how you welcomed them, what would they then think about God? Would they see a God who's genuinely excited to see them? Would they see a God who pays attention to details? Would they see a God who goes the extra mile? Or would they see a God who is distracted and who has time not for them but for other things? And I know that probably sounds harsh, but the reality is that we are God's representatives. We are His ambassadors. People are watching us to see what God's like. And if we're okay with mediocrity, I mean, if we're content with good enough, if we don't strive for excellence in the way we love people, then we're telling them that's what God's like too. And I got to tell you, I've been convicted personally about this lately, and it's messing me up. And so this isn't something to condemn you. It's something that I'm wrestling through because I realize that, man, I may be the only representative of God that somebody sees today. And I don't want to mess that up. And I grieve that I have messed that up over and over and over again. And so this is something that God's really been teaching me lately. So then Peter wraps things up with the ultimate goal. This is the last part of verse 11. He says, we do all these things so that God may be glorified through Jesus Christ in everything. So everything means everything, not just the big things, not just the Sunday morning service, not just, like student ministry and the events that we do. Everything, every greeting, every conversation, every act of service, all of it should glorify God, which is why excellence matters. This is why we can't be content with good enough. This is why hospitality is not optional. Because when we strive for reflecting the character of God and how we love people, when we go above and beyond in how we welcome them, when we treat every single person like they matter to God, which they do, then we're putting God's character on display. I know that for a letter that, we're talking a lot about Peter. I've been going back to Paul, but let's go back to Paul again. Let's take a look at Colossians chapter 3, starting in verse 24. Paul says, whatever you do it from the heart, as something done for the Lord and not for people, knowing that you will receive the reward of an inheritance from the Lord. You serve the Lord Christ. So this isn't just about our jobs. It's not about even the ministry that we get involved in from time to time. It's about everything we do, including how we welcome people. When we greet somebody at the door, we're not just being friendly. According to what Paul says, we are serving the Lord Christ. When we make small talk with a visitor, we're not just being polite, we're working for the Lord. So whatever you do, not just the spiritual things, not just the important things, but everything, every interaction, every conversation, every act of hospitality should be done in order to glorify God. So that's the new standard. That's what we're called to do. And that kind of character is what we're called to reflect. So how do we do this? How do we move from, really good intentions to really excellent execution and all this stuff? So let me give you some practical steps. So if you're a note taker, this is for you. This is the part you've been waiting for. So number one, first, pray for people before they show up. Now, we talked about this a few weeks ago. That was what we agreed to do a few weeks ago as we started this series. And this isn't just a nice idea. It's actually a spiritual discipline. Because when we pray for people before we meet them, our hearts are prepared to see them the way that God sees them. So we're not just looking for people who fit our mold. We're looking for people that God is bringing to us on purpose and for a purpose. That's first. Secondly, we need to prepare with excellence. So this is more for our leaders and our volunteers who serve, but this means showing up early. This means for us having systems in place. This means thinking through the details. So if you're greeting, you show up early. If you're serving, you got to know what you're doing. You got to be prepared before everybody shows up. If you're being friendly, move past being friendly to make somebody feel welcome. So how do you bridge that gap? So it's being prepared. Third, we engage with intentionality. So this is what I'm guilty of a lot. So don't just say hey and walk away. Ask questions. Show interest. Remember that every single person has a story, and God just might be using you as a chapter in that person's story. So what would it look like if every conversation we had left someone feeling as though that they were valued and seen and loved and welcomed? That's incredible. Then fourth, we follow up with care. Because excellence doesn't end when somebody leaves the building. It continues throughout the week. So that means like a text message, checking in. It's a phone call, inviting somebody to something, either at church or something else that's part of your life. It's genuine interest in who they are and where they are with God. So I've been talking a lot about excellence. So please understand that excellence isn't about perfection. It's not about having, everything figured out. It's not about, never making mistakes. Excellence is about heart. Excellence is all about caring enough to try. It's about recognizing that people matter to God, so then they should matter to us. I know we talked about this several weeks ago. Let's take a look at Matthew chapter 25, beginning in verse 35. He said, "For I was hungry," Jesus said, "and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me." Now notice that Jesus doesn't say, "I was a stranger, and you tolerated me." Or "I was a stranger, and you eventually got around to acknowledging me." No, he says, "You took me in." That means to receive somebody as an honored guest, to show somebody hospitality. It means that you make somebody feel at home. And Jesus says that when we do that for other people, then we're doing it for him. And it's reinforced in something else that Paul said. I'm telling you, love that guy. So let's take a look at Galatians chapter 6, verse 10. Paul says, "Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us work for the good of all, especially for those who belong to the household of faith." So what does that mean for us? That means that we have opportunities every single week to work for the good of people who walk through those doors. Every Sunday is a new opportunity to reflect God's character through excellent hospitality. So I know that some of you are thinking, "Hey, John, this sounds great, but I'm not naturally good at this. I'm introverted. I'm awkward. I don't know what to say." So again, if that's you, none of us are good at this. Nobody is naturally good at this. Nobody naturally loves strangers. Remember, that's the goal, loving strangers. Nobody's naturally good at that. None of us naturally goes out of our way to welcome people that we don't know. But that's exactly why we need to trust the Holy Spirit of God to lead us. That's exactly why we need to be transformed by the grace of God first. And that last verse that we looked at in 1 Peter 4, verse 11, Peter said, if anybody serves, let it be from the strength that God provides. So this isn't about your own strength. This isn't about your own personality type and whether you think you're good at small talk or not, whether you think you're the most awkward person on the planet or not. This isn't about you. It's about God. It's not about your personality type. It's from the strength that God provides, which tells me that God doesn't use people who already have it together. God doesn't call the equipped. God equips those who he's called. And so if God is calling you, which God is calling all of us who are followers of Jesus, to lovingly welcome people into the family of God, to lovingly point them to the direction of Jesus, to lovingly walk with them as we ourselves walk towards God, it doesn't matter how awkward we are. It doesn't matter how introverted we are. It's in the strength that God provides. If you're a follower of Jesus, you're called to love people with excellence. You're called to love strangers. You're called to reflect God's character and how we treat others. So excellence in hospitality, it creates a ripple effect. When we love people well, when we welcome them with excellence, when we show them what God's character is like, they don't just feel loved, they ultimately become loving. They don't just feel welcomed, they themselves become welcoming. If you don't think this is true, go to Chick-fil-A. Go inside. Don't stay in your car because talk to people. Go inside Chick-fil-A. They are so nice there that you might be tempted to think they're putting something in that chicken. Nobody's that nice. But I noticed the last time I walked into Chick-fil-A, they were so nice to me that as I was leaving, I said bye to somebody who was sitting at a table. I don't know who that person is. I just got infected with a Chick-fil-A mojo or whatever because that's how culture changes. Somebody's nice to me, and before you know it, dude, I'm a nice guy. It's been modeled to me. I was a big jerk when I walked in, had some Jesus chicken, and now I'm everybody's friend. That's how it works. Lisa and I, every now and again, we go to a restaurant. It sounds fancy. It's not. We go to a burger joint at Ritz-Carlton because they validate parking, and we split a hamburger, and we're cheating the system. We get out of the Ritz-Carlton for $25, and don't tell them. So we go there. Anyway, so I say that to say this. They are the nicest people. It's great. You give the person, they know that you're cheating the system. You give them your valet ticket, and they're going to stamp it for you. They know they're losing money on me. They're still so very nice. They call me Mr. Sanders. They ask how I'm doing. People hold doors open. It's great, and it smells good in there. Go to the Ritz-Carlton, your life will change. But you'll walk out of there, and all of a sudden, I may have walked in feeling like a schlub, and I'll walk out, I feel like a man, doggone it. I feel like I'm the most important person on the planet. Now, did it cost them any money outside of, salary? Did it cost them anything extra to be nice to me? No. It makes me want to go back every single week. In fact, that's our usual Sunday afternoon, go to lunch place, one burger, two people, $25, change your life. It changes not just how the next 5 minutes of your life goes. It begins to change your life. When you are around people who reflect the character and the goodness and the kindness of God, the Holy Spirit of God uses that to transform you. In other words, you become a different person because you are availing yourself of people who are led by and empowered by the Spirit of God. That's how culture changes. That's how churches become known for their love. That's how communities are transformed. And it starts with individual people who decide that excellence matters, that people matter, that reflecting the character of God matters. And look, we're not just talking about making people feel good, and we're not talking about church growth or, creating a friendly environment. We're talking about eternity. We're talking about people's souls. We're talking about people who are far from God, who are finding their way back home. And so what if the person who visits next week is one conversation away from surrendering their life to Jesus? What if your greeting, What if your genuine smile, your genuine interest in what's going on in their life is exactly what God uses to break through those walls that they've been building for years to keep people out? And that's not just possible, it's likely. That's how God works. He uses ordinary people doing ordinary things with extraordinary love to change lives. And so here's my challenge to you. This week, I want you to think about one area where you can strive for excellence in how you love people. Maybe it's learning the names of people. Caleb did a great job today. Maybe it's learning the names of people that you see all the time, but you've never learned their names. Maybe it's showing up early to help set up, or sticking around a little bit later to help clean things up. Maybe it's sending a text message to somebody who visited recently. Maybe it's just asking better questions when you meet somebody. But whatever it is, don't do it because you have to. Do it because you get to. Do it because you have been loved with excellence, and now you get to love other people the same way. So you know what it feels like. You've been on the receiving end of that. Now it's your turn to give it away. Do it because every person who walks through those doors matters to God, so then they should matter to us. So we strive for excellence in everything we do because we want to reflect the character of God. Look, not because we're trying to impress people, but because we're trying to accurately represent the heart of a very loving Father. Not because we're perfect, but because we serve a perfect God who loves imperfect people with his perfect love. And when we do that, when we welcome people with excellence, when we love them with intentionality, when we treat them as though they matter, we're not just changing what happens on Sunday morning. We're giving them a glimpse of what God's like. We're showing them that they're not alone. We're proving that they belong. And that's worth our best effort. That's worth getting out of bed a few minutes early. That's worth sticking around and asking some questions. That's worth making people feel comfortable. A good first impression reflects the character of God, and as such, it can have an eternal impact. Yesterday, I went to Walmart on a Saturday. I don't know what I was thinking. I wasn't thinking. I was trying to be a good guy. So we had some Walmart needs. I'm a can-do kind of fella. So load up the truckster, we go to Walmart. Usually, my experience at Walmart, if Chick-fil-A is the zenith, the nadir is Walmart. You have to look that word up, some of you. It's awful. It's Dante wrote a book, the different layers of Hades and hell. Had Walmart been in existence then, Walmart would have made the list. I mean, it was bad. Walmart, for me, is bad. Yesterday, I had the greatest experience of my life in a Walmart. I walked in, I was expecting hostility. I was expecting people to get in the way. I was expecting people to steal my cart. I don't know what it is sometimes when you're pushing a cart. And ladies, I understand if you put your purse in the cart, I get that, you want to hang on to it. But guys, I get protective of my cart. I mean, I spent 30 seconds putting that thing in the cart. Don't you take my cart. And so I was expecting people to steal my junk that I hadn't bought yet. So it wasn't mine. Anyway, I had an amazing experience. And I said out loud, Walmart is the great leveler of people. Everybody comes to Walmart. And it was great. There were people from, didn't speak the language I spoke, people who didn't have as much as I did, people who had a whole lot more than I had, people who had dirty clothes, people who made fun of, my preppy looking thing that 15 years old that I was wearing, whatever it was. Everybody was at the Walmart. Everybody was looking for a bargain, and everybody was nice. And I thought, only you, God, as I'm getting ready to preach today, only you can make Walmart good to teach me a lesson. Now, I imagine the moment I left, Walmart reverted back to all of its Walmartness and did what it normally does. But for that hour that I was there, it gave me a picture of heaven. I'm telling you, Walmart. It was amazing. My point is that if God can fix Walmart, if God can change my experience, if God can have me skipping out of the Walmart after I've been in there for an hour, what can God do with his people who are his image bearers, who have been saved by Jesus, are being transformed by the Spirit of God, led by the Spirit of God to welcome people, to say, that's Jesus. Let me introduce you. You guys work your stuff out. But I'm telling you, as long as you're here, you're like family. What can God do with people who are surrendered to his way, to welcome, to love people, to love strangers for his kingdom purpose? I'm telling you, God loves this a whole lot more than he loves Walmart. I think he'd tell you. I'm telling you, God's going to do something amazing once we start living as his people, his way. Let's pray together.